Okay. Well, I guess I'm 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 getting used to flying buttress anyway. So um, it's really my pleasure to welcome Steve after many years of not being in touch with him. Let me give you a very brief history. In our Rotary Club in Boca Raton in the early 90s, Steve showed up at one of our meetings and made a presentation about what he was doing in Guatemala. And he's going to tell you the detailed story, but we were basically blown away at what he was proposing to do. And we all got a sense of how significant it was, him being a landscape contractor in Palm Beach County and having Guatemalan workers send all their money back home. And he's saying, I wonder where they're sending it all. And he goes to Guatemala and basically witnesses the families that are receiving the funds that he's paying these workers. And something comes upon him to basically say, I'm going to sell my business and move here and help them grow their community. So that's as much as I'll tell you, and Steve will tell you the rest of the story. But I can also say that the Rotary clubs around the country have responded to this project. And Rotarians go to Guatemala and help him build these facilities. So several members of our club went there several times. Excuse me. And one of our members actually was instrumental in managing his foundation. I don't know how long he did that, but several members were very helpful in managing his foundation. So Steve, tell us the rest of the story.
Sure, Will, and thanks so much, Ken and Shirley. It's great to be back with you all. You've been a big part of our work in Guatemala, as you mentioned, for about 30 years. So we go way back. It's really an honor to have the opportunity to share with you all this evening. And first and foremost, congratulations on being so organized and proactive and active as an e-club. I've spoken with a couple of Rotary e-clubs and still trying to figure out how it all works. So I really love the way you're doing even like virtual volunteering, of sending the notes to people and the interviews and everything. It's really great work you're doing. So congratulations on that. I think it's one of the positive things that has come out of the pandemic, of people realizing they can do things in all sorts of different ways, and so it's really great. When I first moved to Guatemala, as Ken mentioned, I sold my businesses, I liquidated all my assets, moved down to Guatemala as a full-time volunteer, and started a school out in the jungles of eastern Guatemala. When I got to Guatemala, I was really shocked at the tremendous poverty that I saw, being so close to the United States. I learned that Guatemala has the highest rate of severely malnourished children and children dying from malnutrition in the Americas. It has the highest rate of pregnant girls between 10 and 14 years of age, the highest rate of young boys that risk their life trying to make it to the United States to find jobs. And I was really struck by, on one side, the tremendous poverty that I saw, and at the same time, the tremendous amount of resources that they have in Guatemala, just incredible human resources, cultural resources, and natural resources. But because the education system in the country is so poorly designed and so poorly implemented, it's really difficult for rural indigenous people to get ahead. Back then, in the macro numbers haven't changed that much in the country. Only about 5% of rural indigenous boys graduate from high school, and about 2% of rural indigenous girls graduate from high school. So even in the country, nationally, only 1% of the population completes 1 year of college in the whole country. So education is a big challenge in the country. And so I decided to try to help out in some way to help people be successful where they are so that they can stay with their families, so that they can build wealth in their communities and in their country, and to try to kind of reinvent the education system in Guatemala. So we started out with 12 boarding students, and this year we have about 750 boarding students. And our school year just ended the end of October, and we start back up the beginning of February. And we plan on starting next school year with about 1,000 boarding students. So it's grown quite a bit, the organization, over the years. I'm the founder, but about 20 years ago, I was able to hand the organization over to the first students I started with. And so it is now owned and operated by local indigenous people, primarily women from the villages. And so I continue to support as chief technical advisor, but it's the local people that make the decisions, and they're my boss. So it's nice to see that it's become quite self-sufficient in that way. I'm going to try to run just some video in the background to give you kind of some images of what we're doing there. See if this works. Yeah. So basically, Guatemala is over 50% indigenous, but the indigenous people have almost no participation in the government. It's almost an apartheid type of system, and they're born into a society where they're taught that they're going to fail because their parents, had the same challenges. And so we have developed an educational system which is based on the way that indigenous people receive skills and abilities, which is they learn by doing. They learn alongside their parents, alongside their grandparents. They learn by doing. Everything that they learn in the villages is relevant and applicable to their life. And so our educational system is the same way. Everything the students learn by doing, they learn in groups. It's a self-taught methodology. Most of our students are the first ones to even graduate from high school in their family. Most of our students, if we have a family meeting, the parents just sign with their thumb on an ink pad. They can't even write their own name. Our students come from 160 rural villages. We have 11 different Mayan languages and one Afro-Caribbean language spoken at our school. And so it's a really interesting school. It's out in the middle of the jungle. It's only accessible by water. And so we have solar panels that we've been able to install through Rotary grants, and everything is just out in the jungle. We have a little satellite for internet connectivity with the students. We teach the students how to use computers and even to use GPS for surveying, for legalizing the land in their villages, because of Guatemala had a 36-year-long civil war, and so a lot of the people don't have title to their land. Our students build their own classrooms. They build their dormitories. They basically have built the whole education center. So we have a system where we don't charge them anything. It's a full scholarship where we provide room and board and education and everything, but we base it on sweat equity. We ask the students to provide the labor needed to build their own classrooms, to work in the school farm, to try to raise a lot of their own food. And this is to help them keep their self-esteem and their sense of ownership, so that we don't have them feel that they're victims because of being paternalistic and just giving them everything. One of our biggest focuses is girls' education. As I mentioned, we have the highest rate of pregnant girls between 10 and 14 years of age in the Americas. In Guatemala, a very high rate of forced marriage. So we do a lot of work to try to help girls stay in school so that they can get their scholarships or their high school diploma. We help the girls get good jobs out of graduation. We have our students do 3 months of internship per year. And so it's very much a work-based learning program. And our curriculum is service-based. So the primary focus is service to the community. The idea is not to give a kid a scholarship so that the student does well, but so that they will be able to lift their community out of poverty. As Ken mentioned, we have several groups of Rotarians that come down every year and work alongside our students. The Rotary work groups normally come for a week at a time, and they work with our students to help them build their bunk beds and their school desks, and building the classrooms, dormitories. They also help teach English to our students, and just provide fellowship and really help support our students in a number of different ways. Since our students are taught that they're inferior because they're Mayan in the culture, having the Rotarians come down and work with them year after year really helps build their individual and their collective self-esteem, and it helps them have greater direction in their life. The kids love to learn to use the power tools and everything. We have a Rotary floating dental clinic, which is staffed by volunteer Rotary dentists that come in. In Guatemala, they have one dentist for every 16,000 people. So you can imagine the mouths that they encounter. We also work with eye care with the students in surrounding villages. We have Rotarians that come down and they measure their eyes, and they assemble these really inexpensive eyeglasses that they give out to our students, the people in villages in the area. We have fish farm programs, sustainable agricultural programs, all sorts of different things that our students are learning. And because it's a work-based learning program where they graduate with 9 months of hands-on experience, almost all of our students are gainfully employed before they even graduate. So we've been able to achieve the highest employment rate of any school in the country. The national average for employment out of high school is 10%. And we've been able to achieve about 86, 87% gainful employment upon graduation from high school, and our students earn double the national average. So because of this, the girls, instead of having the first child at 14, they tend to not get together with somebody else, not to get married until about 25 or 26, and not have their first child until 26. Our students, on average, they tend to intermarry between the girls and boys, because our boys, from the time they come to our school, they have to learn to wash their own clothes, they have to learn to cook. And so our girls, since when they graduate with good jobs, they don't want to marry somebody that when they get home is just going to be looking at them waiting for dinner. Then they marry our male graduates, because our male graduates are able to share in the tasks related to running the home and raising kids and everything. And the national average fecundity rate is about 6 children per family, and our graduates on average only have 1 child. We have a couple of graduates that have 2 children, but on average, almost all of them decide to only have 1 child instead of 5 or 6. So that's just a cultural change just on their own, that they decided to have less kids and really focus on their 1 child or their 2 children. As you can see, our children build their own school furniture, they build their own tables, they build their own bunk beds. And so this really gives them a tremendous sense of empowerment, having the girls learn to use the power tools and to be able to build their own furniture is a way to really break a lot of the gender stereotypes that are still very, very strong in Guatemala. In Guatemala, oftentimes the men are the ones that make the decisions, and they're the ones that kind of run the show in the villages. And so it's really empowering for the girls to be able to learn to do something as simple as, we give them a stack of lumber and they can measure the wood and they can cut it on their own, and they build their picnic table, and then they have a picnic table in their classroom. And so things like that are a really great way to help them learn that they're the ones that are in control of their own destiny. They can do whatever they want in life. They can reach any goal that they want in life, and it helps get them out of a victim mentality, because the indigenous people in Guatemala, oftentimes, because of all of the negative things that have happened to their culture and their families in the past, they're born into a victim mentality. Oftentimes we'll see the same thing with indigenous populations in the US or African Americans in the US. Oftentimes they're born into a family where they're kind of taught that they're not going to be able to achieve certain things. So this is something that that we really work very much with our kids on helping empower them so that they learn that they can do whatever they want in life. And so basically that's what we do in a nutshell. It's a good sized organization. We have almost 100 staff members now. I'm the only non-indigenous person involved with the organization. We work at a number of different levels. We work actually creating educational systems in Guatemala. We've been able to leverage a lot of resources from the Guatemalan private sector and government, so it's more sustainable. We have in-house restaurants that are run by the kids that generate income for the school. We have Eco Lodge that generates income. And then we also do a lot of advocacy work, both nationally, regionally, and internationally. We do a lot of work on helping to create and implement more inclusive public policy. For example, the Global Climate Change Conference in Dubai in November and the beginning of December. I'll be there with 5 or 6 of our local indigenous staff members, primarily indigenous women leaders. They have been sponsored just by different organizations that cover all their expenses. My trip is covered by the Global Indigenous Caucus for Climate Change, because we hold the vice presidency globally. And so we'll be there for a week before the climate change conference and then 2 weeks at the conference, really working on issues related to climate change and the contributions of indigenous people in helping to mitigate climate change, helping people to adapt to climate change, and also the indigenous people globally, even though they have contributed the least to climate change, tend to be among the most affected by the impacts of climate change. So that's some of the work that we do with global advocacy. We're also very involved with conservation globally. There is a push globally to increase by 2030 the percentage of land and water globally that is under protected areas to 30%. And because indigenous people have historically conserved nature, if you look at a map of the world and the biodiversity hotspots, the parts of the world that have the highest rate of biodiversity, and if you take a map of where indigenous people are and you put it over that map, it corresponds very, very highly in the majority of those places. So because of that, when you create more protected areas, it's logical you will want to create them where there is a high level of biodiversity, and you are very likely to create them on top of indigenous people, and that can create a lot of conflict and poverty and things. So we're very, very involved with that conversation globally and looking at how to do that properly and how to really involve the indigenous communities as guardians and as people that are involved with conservation, and not do it in a way that affects them negatively and such. So that's kind of what we're doing. So we're always every year we tend to have at least one Rotary Global grant that we're working on, and we have a child sponsorship program where we have a list of girls and boys in villages that want to come to our school, and in order to allow another young girl or boy to be able to continue their education at our school, we have to find a sponsor. So we have a sponsorship program, which is $1 a day, $365 a year, and 100% of that money goes directly to Guatemala and to the education of our students in Guatemala. So that's one of the things that we're knocking on doors looking for. And we would love to have any or all of you to come down on a work group sometime. That would be really, really great. And it's really been an honor to be able to share with y'all, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, Steve, first, I just have to reflect that the scope of what you have fostered and are continuing with the help of local people, which is actually the most successful way to do it, obviously. It's just mind-blowing. So with that said, I want to open it up for conversation and questions. Yes, Blanca, what a great program. It's mind-blowing. So, Julia.
Okay, I mute. I just had a question more about I mean, you've really grown the school in the size from when you first started it, and then you're talking like 1,000 students and running a restaurant, but the supplies that they need for maintaining just the day-to-day operations, more kind of like a dorm room, like a kitchen and feeding the kids in that. Is that something where you have a centralized kitchen, a garden? Where do most of those supplies come from for just the feeding all of the kids?
That's a great question. We do have a school farm. We actually have 2 campuses now. We have a campus on the east coast of Guatemala and another campus up in northern Guatemala. And each campus has a school farm where the kids try to raise as much as possible. But since we're in the rainforest, we have any bug that you see in South Carolina, in Guatemala, it's like bigger than a chihuahua. And so we always have lots of problems, raising vegetables, lots of problems with crop failure and things. And so we do have to buy a fair amount of the food and that we use also, especially basic grains and such. So we have central kitchens. The students help out. They make every day about 6,000 tortillas a day by hand, and great big vats of beans and rice and everything. And so our students help cook. The girls and boys help do all the cooking and everything. And we have these great big dormitories. The kids, they build their own bunk beds and everything. And they go home normally 3 times a year for a couple weeks at a time. But other than that, they're just at the school because most of our kids come from villages that are really remote, that are far away from any school beyond 6th grade. The village schools only go up to 6th grade in Guatemala. And so we have students that literally travel for 2 days just to get to our school. And we have students that stay year round because their family can't afford the $30 or $40 it would cost for bus tickets and boat tickets to get back to their village and back to go home for Christmas or something. And so it's for kids that are really, really kind of the poorest of the poor in Guatemala.
They also probably get fed while they're there a lot better than when they're at home too.
Oh yeah, they definitely do. In the villages, the women work harder than the men because they don't have electricity, and so they're up at 4 in the morning starting making food, and if somebody's sick, they're up with them all night and everything. But it is custom for the women to eat after the men oftentimes in the village. So the girls will kind of, if there's a tortilla left, they get the tortilla. And so we have a lot of the girls come in with a lot of anemia, very anemic. We have because we have the highest rate of malnutrition in Latin America, a high percentage of our villages, of our students have learning disability, learning problems because they were severely malnourished as kids. And so when they come in and the girls hear that they can eat as much as they want, boy, they're very, very happy.
Steve, I know Lene has her hand up, and then Ken has a question in the chat. Lene?
Okay, yes, Lene.
Yes, just one or two observations and then a question. Education happens to be my background, so I was particularly interested in the curriculum because that's very much how John Dewey envisioned the curriculum for the United States years ago. Didn't quite work out that way, but it actually developed into a project-based curriculum that really was in the high schools in the 1920s, but it did not continue. But it is evident in the College of the Ozarks over in Missouri. The College of the Ozarks works on the very, very similar model. They've got the restaurants, they've got the students are engaged in all that. And I just really found it very exciting, everything you told us. My question is, once they finished your school and they go back, to, somewhere else. Is there any educational opportunities there in Guatemala for like medical technicians or that type of thing? When you mentioned the low number of dentists, I'm thinking that might also translate to other medical care. And I'm just curious, are there any fields of medicine that they can move into that would also be something that would boost, the well-being of Guatemala in general?
Is when we get off the Zoom, I'm going to look up the College of the Ozarks and
You'll
study.
like that.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Yes, we do have in Guatemala, there is a government, it's kind of a nursing school. It's like an RN school, and they train rural health technicians. So we've had a number of our graduates go on and study to become rural health technicians. We have graduates that are nurses and that are working as dental technicians and things like that. So that is something, and it's something that as you mentioned, our curriculum, it's all hands-on. Everything is place-based. Our teachers, we actually call them tutors. They are we don't have a teacher's desk in the classroom. The students all work on picnic tables, so they're looking at each other. They work in groups. They're given different work that is all self-taught, and they have to discuss it in groups. And if a student in a table doesn't understand something, everyone else at the table has the responsibility of bringing them up to speed. If one of the tables in the classroom doesn't understand something, the other tables will support them. And if the entire classroom doesn't understand something, that is when the tutor or the teacher comes in. And so it's really based on the idea of solidarity, of not getting an education just so that you get ahead, but get an education so you can lift others up, so you can lift your family up, your community up. And so it's all very much service-based, the whole curriculum. And in response to Ken's question, the qualifications to enter the school are a lot of scholarship programs will base the scholarships on a grade point average. We feel in Guatemala that would discriminate against poor people, because the poor people, they oftentimes weren't able to go to school every day in their village, and they didn't have money for school supplies and such. So basically, and also we realized that the neediest students will probably have learning disabilities or difficulties because they're malnourished. And so basically what we do, it's needs-based. We try to find the students that are the poorest. We do work with government databases where we identify the villages that have the highest rate of pregnant girls that are 10, 11, 12 years of age. And we go door to door in those villages and try to get every girl out that we can and give them scholarships to get them out of a dangerous situation, away from risk. And also the way that we do, we have kind of it's what we call it, a passive poverty filter. So what we call it in Spanish. Basically, we don't charge our students, but we say, if you want to come to our school, the sign-up fee is to come and work for free for 3 weeks. And they come and they break rocks and they haul gravel and they do carpentry work. And so we feel that any student that is willing to come and work for free for 3 weeks to go to school needs the scholarship. If they're not willing to come and work for free for 3 weeks, they don't need the scholarship. And so that's our filter. So every year, the sign-up fee every year before they come back to school is they come and contribute 3 weeks of manual labor. And that's what we use for, building the paths and more classrooms and things like that. And it's a way to really make sure that we give the scholarship to the people that most need it. And we really feel that if you give something away for free to someone that is poor, you are making them poorer. You're saying, you can't do it on your own, so we have to give you something. So we feel that it's really important that before we give anything to them, that they give something to the community, that they provide their labor to the community, they give their part, and then they start to receive from the school education and food and everything else.
I have a couple. One is with a dozen or so different languages. How do you deal with that? Do you try to eventually teach them a common language, Spanish or something? And secondly, you've mentioned several times about the pregnancy of the young girls. And when they come to the school pregnant, what are the programs or facilities that you can provide for them there? And is that a problem with them being accepted back in their family after they finished your school? So.
Right now, what the common language at the school is Spanish. And so we have most of the classwork is in Spanish. And so it's a challenge with kids coming in that speak very low levels of Spanish. So we have teachers that speak the primary indigenous languages in the area that can help students get to the point where they can kind of survive in a classroom speaking Spanish. So we do have some bilingual training. And then we also have some English teaching, and we're starting to do that more online because we're starting to use the Starlink satellite antennas out there. And so we're working with Duolingo. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the application Duolingo. The guy that, when you go onto a website and you have to do the CAPTCHA thing where you see something and you write it, the guy that invented that and sold it to Google is Guatemalan, and he is the guy that invented and owns Duolingo, and so he's one of our donors. And so we're working with him to also train our kids to learn English with Duolingo out in the jungle. So that's kind of the way we're working with languages. We currently don't accept girls that are pregnant. We have some students that have children, some girls that will have a child, and they normally will have their mother or a family member take care of their child. Although we've had a couple of students come in that were from abusive families, and so they come in and they just have their baby in the classroom, and they hand the baby around and all day and things like that. But we primarily work with the ones that aren't pregnant yet, and we're working right now actually with the Luis Vanan Foundation, with the foundation of the guy that owns Duolingo, to try to develop a program to work directly with single mothers in villages, and especially looking at how we can work with training single mothers in rural villages for remote digital jobs, to be able to take advantage of the fact that we do now have Starlink here and solar energy is getting cheaper and everything. So we're working with the team on that. It's a challenge because a lot of the digital jobs we see today will be absorbed by artificial intelligence. And so we're working with people looking at what jobs won't be absorbed by artificial intelligence that can be done as entry-level jobs in rural villages. So it's one of the things we're really working hard on trying to look at how to work with these young single mothers in rural villages, or setting up convergence centers in different parts of the country where they can go to school and have a nursery for their children during the day, and then set them up with good jobs, but especially where they can work remotely so that they don't have to be away from their children or have to figure out childcare, because a lot of the 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are pregnant end up being single mothers, and so they're in an incredibly vulnerable situation after that. So it's a really, really good question.
Wow. Any other questions or comments for Steve?
We got Ken's hand up.
Yes.
Steve, I remember way back when you started, you had some difficulty working with the local government. Now that you've proven your successful model, how much has it been replicated? And I would think that the government would want to take your model and spread it over the entire country. Mm-hmm. Has anybody made any progress with that?
It's always been a challenge, because in Guatemala, the number one source of cash in Guatemala is family remittances from the people that have migrated to the US. And over the last 5 years, even during the pandemic, the amount of money that comes back in family remittances has increased between 35 and 45% per year. And the money that is sent back tends to end up in the businesses of about a dozen families that make up kind of the oligarchy here. They have monopolies on a lot of the industries. Only one family sells soft drink and beer. Only one family sells cement. Only one family sells Toyota in the country and such. And so there's a lot of pressure politically, and they tend to be the ones, they and the cartels are the ones that finance the political campaigns of the senators and presidents. And so there's actually a lot of pressure to keep the status quo as is, to keep people illiterate and desperate so that they migrate, so that that money comes back. And so they, the government, publicly, they say they want to help the poor people and the rural indigenous people, but privately, they're really happy with the way things are right now. And so that's been a challenge, but we have been able to leverage resources from the Guatemalan government. About 80% of our operating budget comes from the Guatemalan government. We have to renegotiate it every year. It's really difficult. Guatemala has a 4-year term. President can't be reelected. We have 23 political parties, and the same political party has never governed twice. And they are financed primarily by the drug cartels. And so it's a challenge to do that, but we've been able to do it. We're the only organization, I think, in the country that's been able to do that. And so that has helped us to be able to scale up quite a bit. A lot of the work that we do, we have had a number of other organizations in the country that we have mentored to help them implement parts of what we do. Part of it, the work-based learning, the learn by doing, and then also the way that we work with, we have an in-house employment office, and the way we've been able to achieve such a high level of post-graduation employment. So we do that nationally, and that's one of the things that we do, for example, at the Global Climate Change Conferences. We work with other indigenous organizations globally, helping them look at how they can apply at least some of our basic precepts and concepts and methodology in other parts of the world to be able to do pretty much the same thing in other parts of the world. So we've been really successful with that, being able to see our impact in other parts of the world with other indigenous communities. But it's always a challenge. The area that we work in directly, estimates from the US State Department are about 75 to 80% of the cocaine that makes it to the US travels by land through the area that we work in. They come up boats and small planes from Venezuela, boats from the northern coast of Colombia come into the area and come across. So we have lots of problems with the drug cartels in the area. We've had staff and board members that have been kidnapped and tortured and murdered by the drug cartels. And so so it's a challenging area to work in, but we've been able to achieve a tremendous amount of success, and we're just kind of going up like that, like at literally want to increase our student body. Our goal is by 25% next year, and because the need has increased so much with climate change and other problems in the area. So we're going 1,000 miles an hour. We're really happy and very positive, even in the face of, kind of a challenging climate to work in politically, and then, with the climate problems and things like that. But we're happy and very positive minded people. So we have really brave staff members. They're willing to, they're willing to deal with being threatened or whatever, and they don't quit. They keep working.
Well, Steve, I can't begin to tell you how grateful we are that you gave us a window into all sorts of aspects of the world, from local to global, just thinking about the folks in charge down there wanting to keep the status quo because of the money that the folks who mow our grass send back to Guatemala, and all the, I mean, you sort of went through that in about 20 seconds, but it certainly got my head spinning about how incredibly connected everything is. And I personally think that uplifting these girls and young women especially has the potential to change the landscape there more than many other things you can do. Not that the boys and young men aren't important either, but
Okay.
I just I'm so honored and thankful that you were able to be with us today. I will share that we do like to recognize our speakers, and this book was selected by Lene Young, and we want to thank you very much for being with us today. This book is dedicated in your honor and will be donated to a little free library in upstate South Carolina, because literacy is one of our primary interests of our club. And the book takes children on a tour of the country's most famous sites and attractions, and it's the perfect book for bedtime or nap time. Great illustrations for young children. It's bilingual, English and Spanish, so maybe that's something that would be of interest to some of your younger students, and makes it easy for everyone to read and understand.
That is
Edna,
great. And I'm seeing that the author of the book is Guatemalan, so that is
absolutely,
that is
Guatemala.
really great. Thanks
Yeah,
so much.
absolutely.
Great.
So thank you so very much. I think we could have gone on for another hour, but we're Rotarians, so we try to manage time in that hour.
Also, I forgot to mention, I'm also a Rotarian in Guatemala. I'm from a Rotary family, and I'm a founding member of a local Rotary club in Guatemala. So I'm involved at district level. I'm the district scholarship chair and a few other things. So.
Well, that makes perfect sense that you are. Which club are you in?
Puerto Barrios Rotary Club. And actually, if you have a second, it's kind of an interesting little story. Since I'm from a Rotary family, when I first started working in Guatemala, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, so much need. I had a tough time getting the Rotary clubs in Guatemala City really very involved in our work. So I went to the local port town called Puerto Barrios, which is kind of the East Coast port. And there is a national hospital there that is, very bare bones, and a children's hospital. And I went, and since I was already working with them, because we have clinic and everything down there, and so I went to the social workers and I said, when a child breaks their arm and you don't have even the plaster and the gauze to set their arm in the hospital, what local business people do you call to help? If a child needs antibiotics and you don't have antibiotics, who do you call? And they gave me a list of local business people in the town or local professionals that they called on. And so I went, and I was returning to visit family back in Evanston. I was born in Evanston Hospital, so I'm actually a Rotarian by birth, I guess. And I went to RI. They had back then it was just VHSs. And so I went into the bookshop, and I bought This Is Rotary VHS in Spanish and a bunch of little pamphlets, This Is Rotary in Spanish. And so I went back to Guatemala. I invited these 29 or 30 local business people to a little meeting in town. And I plugged in the VHS. I told them about Rotary. And I said, look, you're all Rotarians anyways, even though you don't know it, because you're the ones that help. And they signed up. All of them signed up, and we got our charter a year and a half later. Took a year and a half to get our charter, 25 members, and half of those members are still in my club. We had the first female president of a Rotary club in all of Guatemala from my club, and my club is more than half women. Very, very active club. It's kind of a perpetual disaster zone. So a little story about the Rotarians that were Rotarians before they knew it.
Steve, that is incredible. And I will say, this is the way we applaud on Zoom. So thank you so very, very, very much.
I thought you were performing an exorcism or something. I'm glad to know. Not getting rid of my bad vibes.
No, I'm not sure who first came up with that one, but since we can't hear each other clap if most of us are on mute.
But wasn't it that the beatniks that clap this way or something? It's kind of like a beatnik. This thing, yeah.
Well, on that note, since we are actually all Rotarians together, we will join together in reciting together the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third,
Will it build
Build
goodwill?
goodwill and good
friendships.
And fourth, will it be beneficial
beneficial
to
to
all
all
concerned? And wow, I just want to thank everybody for being here today. This extraordinary program. Steve, thank you so very much for sharing your passion and just the scope of everything that you have either launched or are currently involved in. So good luck at the so anyway, everybody have a good evening. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, and thank
Great
you all.
job,
It's been
Steve.
such a tremendous honor to be able to